Could Connor McDavid really end up on Broadway? Ranger fans weigh in.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 1365 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets right now. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So today, gonna go ahead and kind of check the pulse of Ranger Nation here. Gonna hear from some of the things that you guys have been talking about, you know, in the YouTube comment section, emails, or whatever it might be. Just everything that you're feeling about the current state of the New York Rangers. It's always interesting to do this. Honestly, we should probably do these mailbags a little bit more often, but better late than never here in the offseason. And like I said, basically gonna turn the controls of today's episode over to you guys and just read a couple of your comments, concerns, and anything else that you have going on right now as it pertains to the Rangers. And we're going to start with Connor McDavid, because in the episode before this one, I recorded an episode where we talked about the possibility of Connor McDavid not only not re-signing with the Oilers after this upcoming season, but then hitting free agency and potentially coming to the Rangers. Now, I still do believe that it is a long shot that happens, but I wouldn't say that it's completely off the table either. And you guys had some interesting comments and thoughts on that as well. So we'll start there. We'll move on to some other topics like K'Andre Miller, him being traded, the signing of Vladislav Gavrikov, the acquisition of Scott Morrow, the Rangers captaincy, and whether they should or will name a captain, all that good stuff. But like I said, let's go ahead and start with some of your questions and comments and concerns on the idea of Connor McDavid potentially coming to the New York Rangers. And we begin with Insomniac here, who says 15 to 20% chance he will go to the Rangers. McDavid wants a cup. The Rangers are a lotto team. You have a better chance of getting McKenna than McDavid. So that one kind of made me laugh. And I get what you're saying in the first part of this, where, you know, at least on the surface, and things can change quickly in one season. Just ask the 2024-2025 Rangers how quickly things can change. But I get what you're saying about right now, at least on paper, it certainly looks like McDavid has a much better chance of winning a Stanley Cup with the Oilers than he does with the Rangers. And I understand that, but one season can obviously change a lot. You know, we'll see how it goes for both teams this upcoming year. So I get what you're saying there. As far as the Rangers being a lotto team and having a better chance of getting McKenna than McDavid, I don't see that either. The Rangers are not as bad as people make it sound like they are. I mean, don't get me wrong. They were absolutely atrocious last season. Everything that they did, or nearly everything they did, was unacceptable on just about every single level you could possibly think of. However, in spite of all that, they only had the 11th worst record in the NHL. I mean, I say only. I realize it was a massive drop from the year before, but I also think they'll be better this upcoming season. So the idea of them being a lotto team and having a good chance of getting McKenna, I don't see that either. I don't think that that's true at all. We'll move on to Brian Gilroy here. If McDavid does not re-sign with the Oilers, the Rangers should have a good chance of getting him. You are correct that Igor is our best selling point. So what Brian's talking about there, he is referencing the episode before this one. We talk about the possibility of Connor McDavid somehow, some way ending up on the New York Rangers. And one of the things that I said is that the big sales pitch for the Rangers, or at least part of it, has to be to Connor McDavid that, hey, we've got a world-class goalie here. We've got Igor Shesterkin. And the Oilers have never had really even average goaltending since Connor McDavid has come into the league. I mean, that might be a slight exaggeration, but it's not much of one. And obviously, Igor will be far and away the best goalie that McDavid has ever played with. So that's what Brian is getting to there. As far as like the Rangers having a good chance, I mean, I talked about this in the last episode as well. I do feel like if the Oilers do not re-sign McDavid, if he wants to test free agency and he actually ends up on a different team next year, I would maybe put the Leafs just ahead of the Rangers. I would go Oilers number 1, Leafs number 2, probably Rangers at number 3, and then a team like maybe Vegas, because you can never count them out when it comes to this player or that player. They always seem to land their guy. But yeah, I mean, I think if he's not back with the Oilers this upcoming, or rather the one after this season, then I think the Rangers probably do have about as good of a chance as anybody else of potentially landing Connor McDavid. But we shall see. Ed Pottinger says, the Oilers are going to sign him, and if he wanted to go to a team, it would be Toronto or Ottawa. Yeah, this is pretty much what I just talked about. Ottawa Maybe. I mean, that is a vastly improving team. They're getting quite a bit better in a very short amount of time. And obviously, they were in the playoffs this last year. But for me, I would think it would be Toronto before Ottawa. We shall see. Joe Rosa says, even if there's a remote chance of getting McDavid, Drury would mess that up. I believe the only team besides Edmonton to sign him, and it'll be a challenge, Maple Leafs. Trust me, Drury is here to bury the Rangers, probably worse than Sather. I don't think we're quite that bad. I mean, you got to remember, the Rangers went 8 straight years of missing the playoffs. Really think about this. This is the New York Rangers here. And in a sport where half the teams make the playoffs, and back then, more than half the teams made the playoffs, and you go 8 straight years without it, I mean, and this is not a sport where it's, I think, that difficult to rebuild. I mean, some teams would convince you otherwise, these teams that are stuck in these perpetual rebuilds. But, rebuilding is almost inevitable in this sport, given the state of the salary cap and players getting older, and you have to get out from under an aging core. And sometimes you have to trade some veterans. It's kind of what the Rangers did the first time that they rebuilt and they sent out that letter and everything. Sometimes you got to, look to the future, and teams do tend to do that. So I don't think we're quite in as bad a shape as we were in the Sather era at all. I mean, there are 2 recent Eastern Conference final appearances for the Rangers. But I would not argue that if McDavid does not re-sign with the Oilers, probably the Leafs have a better chance than anybody else. I think the Rangers are somewhat close, but I would say probably the Leafs. Howie says, maybe we should concentrate on making the playoffs first because McDavid is not going to a team that is not a contender. I 100% wholeheartedly agree with this sentiment. In fact, this is something that we discussed in the most recent episode, the McDavid-centric episode that we posted right before this one. I mentioned it there. If the Rangers, if they turn things around and they have a good season and they're back in the playoffs, they make a little bit of a run at it, whatever it might be, then that bodes well for their chances of getting McDavid. Again, this is assuming that McDavid even makes it to free agency, which is a big question mark in its own right. But if the Rangers do all that, they'll greatly increase their chances. If the Rangers come out this upcoming year and they look flat and lifeless and uninspired and they don't want to play for Sullivan and everybody just looks like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world than playing hockey for the New York Rangers, then that's going to be a problem. First of all, it's going to be a problem for the Rangers this year because I don't think they're going very far if that's the case. In fact, I know they're not going far if that's the case. But beyond that, yeah, I mean, Connor McDavid, he's going to have his pick of the litter. This guy can pretty much decide where he wants to play hockey next offseason. And if he sees the Rangers are a complete dumpster fire for the second straight season, yeah, he is not coming to the New York Rangers. I think we can pretty much all agree on that one. Chris says, he is the greatest hockey player ever. Well, I mean, he's going to be up there when it's all said and done. We can't say ever as of yet, but we'll roll with it. He is the greatest hockey player ever, and yet no one outside the hockey world knows who he is. I have to believe going to the Rangers and raising a cup to become a living legend is a bit enticing. See, I get what you're saying, and I think that would definitely be true of a lot of other players because, yeah, I mean, they are the Rangers' original 6 team, all this history. They've been around forever, and players seemingly against logic based on the things that have gone on here and the fact that they have won cup in 85 years, they do tend to want to come here. I don't know that McDavid really needs all that. I don't know. And I could be wrong. Maybe he's dying for that. Maybe he wants the bright lights of a big city and big expectations and a rabid fan base. And Oiler fans are great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's a very passionate fan base in its own right. But I don't know that really speaks to McDavid the way that it would speak to other players. I would love to be wrong about it, though, because if I am wrong about it, that would seemingly increase the chances that Connor McDavid one day does play with the Rangers. Clearing the benches says, this is the most Ranger-ish type of scenario available, but what if he comes to New York and in 4 years still no cups? As much as I want to see the Rangers bring in the best players available, I see this one possibly ending up in a drawer with Phil Esposito, Bobby Carpenter, Bruce Driver, Bobby Holik, Wade Redden, and Brad Richards, and even 99 Wayne Gretzky. I say leave it be and let it roll with Cooley, Othman, Perot, and the kids. So I get what you're saying. I understand the comparisons and whatnot, and a lot of those players, pretty much everybody you mentioned there, came to the Rangers once they were past their prime, into their 30s, or at least, at least their early 30s, and in some cases even older than that. The thing is, though, McDavid is a better player than almost everybody you mentioned. We're not going to say he's better than Gretzky or anything like that. Phil Esposito was a wonderful player, but I'd put McDavid ahead of him as well. These other guys, I mean, they were very clearly past their prime. I think pretty much everybody else that you mentioned here, I mean, for sure, guys like Driver and Holik and Redden, I mean, I don't even know what that was. That was just atrocious hockey, but they just buried him in the minors. But yeah, I mean, The thing is, I would still go after McDavid. I won't let that stop me. McDavid, you got to remember, when he's a free agent next offseason, I believe he's going to be 29. We're talking about the guy that is far and away the best player in the game today. So I'm not going to let what happened with like Bruce Driver like concern me about the possibility of signing Connor McDavid. To me, it's just not really like, I understand the comparison again, but to me, it's not even a blip on the radar because McDavid is just that good. And if that was to happen, if McDavid was to come here and 4 straight years without a cup, I mean, it wouldn't be ideal, but this dude's played 10 years in Edmonton. They don't have any cups. I mean, are they looking to run him out of town because of that? You know, and I feel like if you want to win a Stanley Cup, that'd be the best way to do it, to somehow get Connor McDavid under contract with the New York Rangers. And again, all this hinges on him even making it to free agency. That's step one, and that very well may not happen, but it's the offseason. It is fun to discuss these things. Roman. So Roman's got similar sentiments to what I just said here. Roman says, McDavid doesn't strike me as a New York guy. To get him here, I'd realistically think you'd give him $20 million a year. A $20 million a year contract is somewhat scary to think about. Leon Draisaitl currently has the highest contract in the NHL in terms of money per season. And I want to go ahead and look that up because that is, somewhat important, obviously. I want to say that it's around like 14 point something million for Draisaitl. Okay, it's 14 million right on the dot. 14 million a season for Draisaitl. So McDavid, I think you're looking at like 17 million a season. But to your point, Roman, if he's kind of hesitant to come to New York and the bright lights in the big city and would rather just stay with Edmonton, the one way to pry him away would be to go nuts with the contract, the length and the dollar amount of the contract. And would it take 20 million a year? I mean, it could. It's entirely possible, especially when you see the salary cap rising and rising. I'd like to think that you could do it for a little bit less than that. But the bottom line, if the Rangers have a chance of getting McDavid, I'm not going to haggle over $1 million or $2 million per season. It's Connor McDavid. You make it happen. And then Pete says about McDavid to the Rangers, first he would have to go to the Kings, then the Blues, then finish his career with the Rangers. Swore I've seen this somewhere before. Yeah, Pete, that does sound somewhat familiar for sure. And if that were to play out just like that, I would be convinced that we're pretty much living in a simulation at that point. We're living in a rerun, if you will. But yeah, I mean, interesting comments and thoughts on Connor McDavid. There's a lot to unpack here. And again, he's got to make it to free agency for this to even really become a discussion. But yeah, man, it is fun to think about. Even if he didn't come to the Rangers, it would still just be ridiculously exciting to see that happen, to see him make it to free agency, because you just don't see that in the NHL. If you've got a young superstar player, homegrown, I mean, far more often than not, they get locked up long-term. And that may well happen with McDavid, but obviously it hasn't happened yet. And we'll keep an eye on it going forward. But in just a second, I'm going to shift our attention to some other topics. Gavrikov, Keandre Miller, Scott Morrow, a couple others. The other wheelings and dealings that the Rangers have made this offseason. Some of you guys weighed in on that as well. And we'll discuss that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets right now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, we just want to go ahead and thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. It means a lot that you guys obviously stick with this team and stick with this podcast throughout the whole season, the offseason, the whole 9 yards. For the everydayers, moving forward, we're going to be continuing our fun-filled offseason series of best and worst case scenarios. It's basically just what it sounds like. We take a look at every single player that we project to make the Rangers opening night roster this upcoming season. We talk about everything that could go right, everything that could go wrong, and then just kind of have some final thoughts and a verdict and a season outlook for said player at the end of the episode. We might turn our attention to Adam Fox in the next one, but for right now, more questions and comments from you guys for the special Locked On New York Rangers mailbag edition here, and we shift our attention to some of the other offseason wheelings and dealings that the Rangers have made. We'll start with this comment from Muted Growl here. So he's referring, or he or she is referring to the trade that sent Keandre Miller to the Canes in exchange for a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and Scott Morrow. This is what Muted Growl had to say about that. If this trade happened with almost any other team, I'd be laughing to the bank. But Carolina is a smart team, so it does make me wonder. And that's a fair point. Carolina does seem to have a certain type of player that they like to go for, and it's got to be somebody that's going to fit their system. And I think more often than not, they tend to get it right. It's very rare that the Kings go out and get a player, and then it's like a square peg in a round hole kind of a deal. They get players that are going to play the system right and fit in as far as the culture is concerned and whatnot. So, your eyebrows do go up a little bit there. And again, the Canes are a team that's kind of been knocking on the door recently. Although I did see a stat that kind of made me wonder about that a little bit. It's been years and years and years. I think since before Brendan Moore ever took over as the head coach, since the Canes have won a single game in the Eastern Conference Final. They've made it there a couple times, but they keep getting swept right out of it. So, do we overrate the Canes? Maybe a little bit, but it's just one of those teams that seems to have its bleep together, for lack of a better term. Again, they bring in players that fit the system, and it tends to go well. And, look, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least a little bit nervous about this homegrown defenseman prospect for the Rangers that they sent away to a division rival and one of the Rangers' biggest rivals in general. It makes me a little bit nervous. But when you look at the contract that Miller got, and you look at the way that his play declined the last two seasons, and especially this past season, I can't really get too upset about the Rangers for doing this. He's a half decade into his career, and we're still kind of waiting for him to become the player that we all thought we were getting, the player that he looked to be in his first couple of seasons in the league, and then everything pretty much went south. But yeah, I think Muted Growl makes a good point here. The fact that he is on the Canes, it does give you a little bit of nervousness, or at least it does for me. But again, I think it's a deal that needed to happen, and the Rangers did indeed make it happen. Agent Smith says, I am floored the Rangers got this much for Keandre Miller, who was clearly on the way out. I'm not even mad he went to the Canes because you go for the best package available. Rangers are now in a much better shape, draft capital-wise, and added an above-average prospect to boot. Organizational outlook is vastly improved in a day. I do think that was a good day for Drury. Like I said at the time, the first day of free agency, I thought that was the best day that Chris Drury had as Ranger general manager in a very long time. He got his guy in Gavrikov. He struck this deal with the Canes and got a very good return, I thought, for Keandre Miller. And the funny thing about this to me is that, and this is to Agent Smith's point as well here, getting this much for Keandre Miller, I got laughed at, man. You guys, some of you thought I was nuts when I said that you could get a first-round pick in exchange for Keandre Miller. But I just looked at the trade deadline this past season, and that seemed to be the going rate. We're seeing guys who are just role players at best, and they're fetching second-round picks. And I'm thinking Keandre Miller probably gets you a first. I, too, was floored, though, that they got this much for him. I think it was a good trade, a trade that needed to happen. And, again, there's some nervousness from me and probably some from other Ranger fans as well as far as him going to the Canes. But again, it had to happen. If the Canes were offering the most back to the Rangers and the most back by a long shot, then so be it. That's where Keandre Miller has to go. That's where they sent him. It is what it is. And now we begin the process of finding out who won this trade. The Rangers have to put those draft picks to good use to really win this trade. Dirk says, Scott Morrow straight across for the turnover machine Miller would have fleeced the Canes. I don't know if I would go that far. Morrow has played like 16 games in his NHL career, and there's certainly some upside there, and he's got some offense to his game as well, kind of known as an offensive defenseman. A little bit on the smaller side as far as defensemen go, but I do think he's a promising prospect. In a way, he almost kind of replaces Zach Jones in this Ranger lineup, and I like Jones. I don't think he's like a superstar or anything like that, but I feel like he was at least deserving of a spot in the lineup more often than he actually got into the lineup. But this might be an upgrade here. Let's just hope the Rangers do a better job with Morrow than they did with Zach Jones. We keep everything rolling here. We go to Anonymous. This is in reaction to the signing of Gavrikov. Good work by Drury, and I loathe Drury. This team could actually make the playoffs. Yeah, I think the Rangers are going to make the playoffs. I've said for 4 straight years now, 4 straight off seasons, and this will be the 5th, that I do think the Rangers are a playoff team. So I've been right 3 out of 4 times. Even if you weren't sold on the Rangers from 2 years ago, I don't know that any of us could have really foreseen the kind of collapse that this team endured this past season, and obviously missing the playoffs was part of that. But I think that overall, this is a team that, all you got to do is finish in the top half of the Eastern Conference and you make it. I do think this team will do that. And to Anonymous's point here, I do think that was one of the better days that Drury had in quite some time, as we talked about earlier in today's episode. B King says, Drury won the day. Not every move has been perfect, but 2 conference finals now. He has retooled the team. Maybe some faith and less whining from the fan base. Well, we're Ranger fans. There's always going to be some of that. Yeah, I've said all along, I do think Drury has done a better job as Ranger general manager than most would admit, but I also think that his worst stretch as Ranger general manager has been about the past year and a half. Just things not really going right, not really working out all that well. And hopefully here, he's made some moves that are going to improve this team. But that's where people lose me, because there's people that try telling me that like Drury is the worst general manager in the history of the sport. You can't go that far, okay? 2 conference final appearances in 3 years. That alone tells you that that is not true. He's been a mixed bag for sure. There have been some hits. There have been some misses. More hits early in his Ranger GM tenure, more misses later in his Ranger GM tenure. So if you're mad at Drury for everything that happened with the Rangers this past season, I mean, I think the players deserve most of the blame, but Drury is clearly not blameless, and I understand where you're coming from. And if you want to let Drury have it for the job that he did over the past year and a half, I completely understand, and have at it by all means. Richard says, is Gavrikov a tough guy? Other teams are constantly harassing Fox as part of their game plan. It would be great if he was paired with someone big who is tough, not Lindgren who is tiny. Yeah, Lindgren played bigger than certainly his frame would suggest, but we're also seeing kind of the price that he's paid for that with the injuries that have happened recently, and obviously he's been banged up in recent seasons. As far as Gavrikov, I mean, he's not really that guy that's going to go out there and like clean somebody's clock and wow you with all these open ice hits. I mean, he will hit a little bit, and overall, he's got some good size as well. He to me is somebody more that has a very, very safe floor. This is somebody that is very steady, very consistent, has good positioning, defends the blue line, will clear guys out of the crease if need be, has some offense to his game. Just a very, very solid, steady, all-around defenseman. And when you look at how bad the Ranger defensemen were this past season, or at least how inconsistent they were at best, somebody like that does have some appeal. Even if there's not a ton of flash, even if there's not like an astronomical ceiling or anything like that, I think a player like that is still appealing. Now, as far as being a tough guy and somebody that's going to throw on the gloves and fight everybody and jump into every different scrum and have somebody in a headlock at the bottom of a pile, I don't think he's really that guy either. But he can certainly hold his own, and he can certainly stand up for himself out there. I have really warmed up to the Gavrikov signing. I was kind of lukewarm to it early in the offseason, but look, you're trying to improve this team, and they felt they needed to move K'Andre Miller. Got to replace him somehow, and Gavrikov was the guy, and they brought him in, and they got the guy that was at the top of their list as far as their offseason free agent targets. So good on them for doing that. So going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I want to wrap up today's special mailbag edition of Locked On New York Rangers by talking about the captaincy, or more specifically, you guys are going to talk about the captaincy. Some interesting opinions there. Even some love for Will Cooley potentially being the next guy to wear the captain. Definitely some Trocheck fans, some JT Miller fans. So we'll discuss all of that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy, just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. We've all been in that spot where we need to hire the right person like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode by diving into another hot button topic among Ranger fans, and that is, of course, the question of if and when this team will name a captain and who it should be and who it will likely be, the whole 9 yards. What does this leadership group look like for this upcoming season and beyond? So going to go to your comments here. JT Hockey says, Trocheck should be the captain. Miller and Fox should get the A's. Mika and Breadman are out. So you could definitely make a case for everything that you just said there. I do think that you will see Vincent Trocheck wearing a letter this upcoming season. we've talked about this recently too. The Rangers very quietly, it's very much a subplot. Not too many people have talked about it all that much, but it wasn't too long ago. We saw this team with 6 alternate captains, which was a little over the top and slightly ridiculous, but that number has dwindled. And obviously they traded Trouba this past offseason, so there goes your captain. And they traded Kreider this offseason, so there goes another alternate captain. And you're down to just Mika, Panarin, and Fox. Those are your 3 alternate captains. And I think if nothing else, you might not see them name a captain. I think you'll get at least one more alternate captain. And if that's the case, I think Vincent Trocheck is probably that guy. But JT wants Trocheck to be the next captain. You can certainly make a case for that. I'm still kind of in the camp of JT Miller. I just feel like he's come over to change the culture, shock the system a little bit, and be one of those guys that, can get in your face a little bit, but can also lead by example just from the style of hockey that he plays. That straight line, forechecking, hard nose, in your face game, not to mention all the skill that he brings to the table, that is basically synonymous with JT Miller. For me, he should be the guy. Like I said, you can make a strong case for Trocheck too. I think Trocheck would be my second choice. As far as Mika and Breadman being the odd men out wearing the A's, though, I don't think they're going to do that either, because to begin with, this has been a very, very chaotic, year plus, if you want to go back to last year's offseason with the New York Rangers. And I don't know that stripping guys of their alternate captaincy, even if you could make an argument that it is somewhat deserved, I don't know that that's going to do a whole lot of favors to that locker room. And with Panarin, he's going into the last year of his contract. If he walks in free agency, then there was really no point in taking that away from him from just one season. And on top of that, look, you could still re-sign Panarin. And I don't think that a good way of doing that is going to be to have the new coach strip him of his alternate captaincy to start this upcoming season. And we could debate, and we have debated, and we will continue to debate whether the Rangers should extend Panarin at some point and whether he'd want to come back. But to just at least leave the door cracked on that, I don't think you want to take away the alternate captaincy. Now, Mika, he's here for another 5 years, pretty much come hell or high water. You could take that away, but it's one of those things where, like, you've got a new coach. Let's let the coach see how these guys interact, and let's see how they perform. Next offseason, if Mika doesn't cut it this year and you want to move in a new direction, maybe that's the time to do it. Right now, though, I don't think I would take away an A from anybody. As bad as last season was and as poor as the leadership was, I don't think I'm going to do anything that drastic when this team needs a rebound season. We've also got Lewis Peddleton here. JT Miller should not be the captain. He just got here. That is true. But again, I've talked about this off and on, throughout the offseason here. I'm looking for this team to do something bold. When you are a fan of a team, and I can't stress this enough, that has one Stanley Cup in 85 years, maybe it's time to roll the dice a little bit. Maybe it's time to do something that takes some guts to do, that has some risk to it, that has high risk and high reward. And to me, that's JT Miller leading the way as the next captain of the Rangers. He obviously is somebody that can be a little bit abrasive and, some controversy and other stops in his career. There was that time he was arguing with Henrik Lundqvist on the ice. Tampa Bay trades him away. He's on Vancouver. He's a great player there, obviously, but him and Elias Pettersson, that was like oil and water. It just did not work. It just did not gel. So look, there's some risk involved, but I also think JT Miller got what he wanted. He wanted to be traded. Once those trade wins started to pick up a little bit last offseason, it was pretty clear where he wanted to go. And since he had the full no move clause, he basically held all the cards and he worked his way back to the Rangers. I just feel like that being the case, I don't think you have to worry too much about JT Miller, doing something that's going to hurt this team. To me, it's one of those things. It's like, this is the style of hockey we're going to play. And I think for that reason, JT Miller does make the best captain. Not saying there's no risk involved, because there is, but for me, he's my pick. We've got New York Rangers fan 05 here. I do like JT. Don't feel he's quite captain material, though. Seems too much my way or the highway type of guy, which can easily divide a room. Instead of, hey, even if we don't agree, let's all get pulling on this rope in the same direction type of leader, which is how you bring a room together. And I get what you're saying there, too. And maybe that's a point for somebody like Vincent Trocheck to be the captain instead. Trocheck, to me, is the little bit safer pick than JT Miller as the next captain. Because I think Trocheck has stepped up as a leader for the most part, although I would argue that he was part of that entire dumpster fire for the entirety of last season as well. He's not blameless either. There's other guys I would blame for last year before Trocheck, but he's not blameless. He was part of that as well. Look, you could make a case for Trocheck. JT Miller, though, to me, he's somebody that's going to hold guys accountable, and accountability is something that was missing this last season in that Ranger locker room. We've got Matt Makuda here. And Matt says, Cooley should get it. Now, here's an interesting one. Cooley should get it. Team is getting younger, and he is a big part of the next wave. He's also the only player on the team I would trust to not make me want to turn off the TV whilst not being an alleged psycho like Miller. That's a great comment. Look, I mean, if you really, really, really want to be bold, you can make Will Cooley the next captain of this team. I don't think the Rangers are ready to do that this offseason, but I've said before on here, assuming the Rangers make Will Cooley a priority, and he did get the 2-year extension, but assuming they eventually make locking him up long-term a priority, and he's a Ranger for many, many years to come, which I believe he will be, I will be stunned if Cooley goes his entire Ranger tenure. If he gets another contract after his current one, I will be stunned if he goes his entire Ranger career without at least wearing a letter of some kind. This guy plays a hard-nosed, in-your-face brand of hockey. He does not back down from anybody out there. That was true of him from the second that he made his debut as a rookie. Remember a couple of years ago when he came up for just, I guess it was 3 seasons ago at this point. He was only up for 4 games, but he got into at least 1 fight. It might have been 2 fights. He's not going to back down, and he's got, some edge to his game as well. Hard hitter, second in the NHL in hits this past season. Yeah, I mean, for my money, Cooley, that's somebody that should be looked at as a leader. And Matt, when you talk about that new wave of Ranger players, I mean, Cooley is kind of like the veteran in a group that includes Lafreniere. That's crazy, too. If I'm not mistaken, Will Cooley is actually older than Alexis Lafreniere, which is tough to digest for a second, but I believe that is actually true. But you look at that younger group that's coming along, Cooley could lead the group of Lafreniere, Gabe Perreault, Brett Berard, Brandon Hoffman, guys like that. Like, in that group right there, and obviously there's a lot riding on the development of all those players moving forward. But of that group there, I mean, Cooley's like the grizzled veteran of that group, which is crazy to think about. I know Lafreniere's played more games, but he's also younger than Cooley, if I'm not mistaken on that. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want to be bold, if Cooley's chances would improve if the Raiders do not name a captain this season, and then they go into next season and they have to name a captain, at that point, I think Cooley would at least be in the running. I don't think he's really in the running this offseason, though, if they name a captain. Big Red says, assuming Cooley gets 0 consideration, Miller is the best choice of a pretty bad bunch. That's the thing, too. Like, I've been making a case for JT Miller. There's no perfect candidate right now to be the next captain of the New York Rangers. And you could say the same thing was true when it was going to come down to either Trouba or Miller or Mika. You could make cases for any of those guys, but none of them then, just like none of them now, really jumps off the page where you snap your fingers and go, yep, that's the next captain of the New York Rangers. I don't think that player really exists. Again, I'm not saying that there aren't good choices. I'm not saying that there's nobody on this roster that could do a good job as Ranger captain, but there isn't that obvious slam dunk choice right now. That is definitely true. And then Frank says, this team suffered from a serious lackadaisical attitude. JT is the best choice to correct that. I think Vincent Trocheck will support that move and take one of the A's instead. Yeah, if I'm predicting like somebody to get a letter this upcoming season, it's going to be Trocheck. Now, he could be the captain. I think more likely he's an alternate captain. But yeah, I think JT Miller, this is the guy that's going to keep you honest, both through his personality and the way that he plays out there. Look at the jump, and we talked about this before, but look at the jump that Mika Zibanejad had last season, pre-JT Miller trade versus after JT Miller trade. And Mika actually found his game a little bit and just played a better overall brand of hockey once he was on a line with JT Miller. That's the same reason why I want those two together this upcoming season as well, which does limit your options as far as third line center is concerned, but I don't care. Mika needs to play with JT Miller so we get the good version of Mika and not the bad version of Mika for this upcoming season and beyond. But we can call it there. Just wanted to mention, this is going to be the third and final episode of this week. I'm going to be away Wednesday through Sunday. Right now, we are still only doing 3 episodes per week, and that will continue until the start of September when we get back to 5 episodes per week. Definitely looking forward to that. But if anything big happens while I'm away, we'll obviously discuss it first thing once I get back. We'll have an episode on Monday for you guys. Definitely looking forward to all that. Also, if you have any Sam Rosen or Stefan Matteau stories, feel free to send them my way. Stefan Matteau, obviously, I'm referring to the Game 7 double overtime winner. If you ever met Sam, we're continuing to do our tribute to him throughout the entire offseason here. So definitely feel free to share those stories as well. And fantasy hockey. If you played last year, email me. Let me know you're coming back this upcoming year. That's all you have to do, and you're all set. I've heard back from some of you guys already. And if you did not play last year, but you would like to, then definitely email me or DM me sooner rather than later. We'll save your spot in line in the event that we have people from last year who don't come back for this upcoming season. But yep, figure we can call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, at jchik17. Once again, at jchik17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.